feeling stuck at $45,000 a year. You had no college degree.
180 million users, and I came in there and I knew a ton about that one subject, enough to beat out the other candidates and get that job. I was waking up at 3 a.m, working on commission. I managed 1,000 people in the Philippines and in Costa Rica. I had bodyguards used to fly down there. Became one of the top 10 reps ever there.
You created the Justin Michael method, which generated over $1 billion in client revenue.
10 years later, when I got to Silicon Valley, I helped him get a job, and he brought me into what got acquired by Salesforce, well, for $2.5 billion.
You're a 10 times best-selling author. You're in the top 1% of business authors worldwide. You've got 60,000 followers on LinkedIn.
And this was probably like a $400,000 deal that turned into a 7-figure deal.
You've generated $1.2 million in client revenue in just 20 hours.
And then I really just follow up way more than anyone I've ever seen, because the 80-20 rule, I contacted this guy 75 times in a row, same message every single day. So that's why I believe in pronoia. The universe is probably doing me good. One technique that works really well is...
Hi everyone, we're here with Justin Michael today, who is arguably one of the most renowned people in the B2B sales world. Justin, before we begin, I just want to share with our listeners some stats, because you've had an amazing career, and for those of you who aren't in the sales world or who haven't heard of you before, there's some really interesting things that I want to share, because you created the Justin Michael method, which generated over $1 billion in client revenue. You're a 10 times best-selling author. You're in the top 1% of business authors worldwide. You've got 60,000 followers on LinkedIn. You've generated $1.2 million in client revenue in just 20 hours. And as you can see from this, I want to establish that you've had an amazingly successful career. But I want to talk a little bit about your journey and how you got here before we dive into all these different points. Because there was a time when you were saying that you were feeling stuck at $45,000 a year. You had no college degree. And then you managed to get a job at LinkedIn and at Salesforce, and you pulled off this amazing career turnaround. Can you just tell me a little bit about that? What sparked that change?
Yeah, so I actually started in the music business, if you can believe it. So by the time I was 19 years old, I was on the Sunset Strip, and I was managing rock bands, and I was playing in a band. And so I fell into sales at 21 because I had been doing music, it was just sort of a day job. Like, I guess people like Johnny Depp did telemarketing and things. So at about 21, I started telemarketing, and I was making, I don't know, $7 an hour. It wasn't anything too exciting, but there's these 3 reps that were always number one, going to Vegas all the time. And I would just start sitting by them, and they get there at 3 a.m. in the morning Pacific time. And that was a clue. So I started going early. I started emulating them. It was a lot of tonality because it was the same 9-minute script, but I learned a ton then. By the time I was 24, I was a supervisor there, managing 300 reps. Then I was a team trainer. I was splicing in and training people to do calls, and I became one of the top 10 reps ever there. So my name would be on the leaderboard, and the CEO would call in from his jet, and I would take 100 credit cards in a day or whatever. But this was transactional, fast-moving boiler room stuff. It was, legit cubicles and stuff. And they used to bring the kids from UCSB, the college students, to watch me, and I'd be just like throwing a squeezy ball up and down and just taking credit cards consistently. So the reason I shared that beginning of the story is because my first VP of sales at that job, where I did really well, 10 years later, when I got to Silicon Valley, I helped him get a job, and he brought me into what was Exact Target, and Exact Target got acquired by Salesforce in 2011-12 for $2.5 billion, and I ended up being there. That was my big second break. But the first 10 years were the lost years. I was just working in incubators, working for little SaaS companies. But in my mid-20s, around 26, I met a couple that had a company that they'd sold to Larry Ellison at Oracle. It was a charity fundraising platform. And again, I was waking up at 3 a.m, working on commission. And this was after the 2007 financial crisis, and I was selling SaaS. And a lot of my calling techniques now, to this day, that I train teams on, come from that time at 27. I'm 45 now. Still at this time, because the economy collapsed in 2007, there weren't a lot of good sales jobs, and I was kind of just getting my feet wet. So I'm like, hey, like Coolio said, have Mike will travel, sleep on gravel, So I'm just like, just give me a good job, right? So they seem really cool. And interestingly enough, 5 years later, after going back into telemarketing and running big teams, I managed 1,000 people in the Philippines and in Costa Rica. I had bodyguards used to fly down there, but I finally got up to Silicon Valley when I turned 31, 32. And that couple made the call to Joe Green, who introduced me to Sean Parker. And I worked directly for Sean Parker for 1 year. And then I went to Salesforce. So it's all interconnected. That 10 years of incubators and boiler rooms and making next to nothing, selling shoes, working the door of a nightclub. I just never thought I would amount to even making 100,000 a year. And then I got to Silicon Valley and instantly hit it. So, but it was really frustrating because when I got there, I had no college degree, no real CV to take me seriously. And so I got rejected by like thousands of jobs. But I just kept going for a few months. I just had faith and kept a positive mindset. And then finally, those investors, where I'd worked for them in a couple companies, made a call. And what I found going to Silicon Valley is it was about niche specialization. I knew so much about charity fundraising SaaS. I was so networked in that. They had a community named causes.com that was the launch application on Facebook with like, I don't know, 180 million users. And I came in there and I knew a ton about that one subject, enough to beat out the other candidates and get that job. And that was really one of several lucky breaks that we can talk about.
That's amazing. And it seems like from that story as well that you create all these interpersonal relationships, which you can see from your LinkedIn. You got over 60,000 followers. How do you curate these relationships and be able to use them to be able to grow and grow your personal brand and your career?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting because people are getting way too caught up in social media and using that. The reach, I think, is down to 5 or 10% now. Yeah, I mean, you can go on LinkedIn and do a lot of inbound, and people do that. That's a lot of the industry. My advice to you would be think like Earl Nightingale and do the opposite. So I'm like really a proponent of outbounding, and that's a really different type of flow. You know, if you're going to do consulting, you don't need to create a landing page or a cohort or an offer or do Hormozy style. So like as a CRO, what you could do is just privately message people, getting them onto Zoom calls, and that becomes a better strategy. So many people are focused on the constant inbounding, you know, so I built this business in a different way, doing it that way.
And how do you think that you've built that differently to withstand new technologies as AI is starting to grow? How are you integrating that?
Well, people want to use clay.com and really sophisticated sales engineering, which there's this N8N, which you could use it. It's almost like a workflow management tool. It has feelings of coding, almost like SQL coding. And fundamental problem with email is you can only send 50 a day out of Gmail. So you go in and you get 15 Gmail accounts, warm them all up. Then you get this clay table and that ingests different data sources. And then you run these campaigns through it. And you almost like takes 10 to 20 hours to really learn these systems, do it well. To me, that's like a, technical RevOps in essence, which is fine. But if you're not like a very technical spreadsheet person, like I'm going to advise your team to be going more strategic, like understanding strategy and just getting really good at talking to C-levels. So the problem is now, like, you make 100 cold calls and you talk to 5 executive assistants and you don't get much live fire. So your team really needs to get in front of people and be having conversations where DM flows are really like the new cold call in a sense. Like selling LinkedIn, we called it the Bloomberg terminal, and the goal was to have it fully replace the telephone. So you have these two trends of like super technical selling with all these different tech stacks, and then this return to people who are figuring out to have one-to-one C-level conversations and do it really effectively, which is what I'm talking about in the work. So my knowledge base of using the tooling and the tech stacks was really like at the bleeding edge 5 years ago, but I've gone more the other way to soft skills and teaching reps, like, how do you talk to CXO? Like, how do you have business acumen? How do you read the balance sheet and have a point of view, which is going to get them to respond to the email? Okay, ChatGPT wrote this awesome email, but it's vanilla. The relevance isn't sharp enough. They're going to look at it and be like, oh, another ChatGPT email.
And I think there's a lot of times in your careers that reminds me of where you're kind of doing the opposite of what everyone else is trying to do. That's how you break the pattern, you break the frame. There's actually a story that I wanted you to talk about a little bit where you managed to contact someone a lot higher up in an organization that just had a merger using the LinkedIn's People Also Viewed tab. I was wondering if you could share a bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing. One technique that works really well is looking at people also viewed from standard LinkedIn. So you would go to the profile of like a chief digital officer. What happens is, like in Zoom Info or Lucia or Cognism, really the same profile data is shown over and over again. So it's kind of becomes a bit of an echo chamber on
Mhm.
how to multi-thread. Like everyone kind of contacts the same 3 to 5 people at Twilio, or the same 3 to 5 people. In this case, e-commerce going after Office Depot in the merger with Office Max and going after this chief digital officer. So went after him for like 3 months, sent him probably 20 direct emails, personalized every way I could think of with the merger. And then I started to look on his LinkedIn profile, and you can test this in your own company. So you go to your C level and you look at people also viewed. And there was this VP of financial planning and analysis, Jamaican guy. I just remember his name was Vern, I think. I called him. His cell phone number, he picked up immediately. I explained the situation. I'm like, you're merging. We have 40,000 workers in a cloud. We can normalize the data, clean it up. Like, there's all sorts of artifacts on the site. And he's like, wow, this is really interesting. You should talk to the CDO. I was like, I'm trying to get a hold. So then I went into my CEO's LinkedIn, sent a message that way, which I ended up calling ghost driving or something. And that message hit and landed. And then we ended up like having a discovery call and then going out to Boca Raton and doing like a pretty solid deal, like multiple 6-figure tranches. Getting really creative about how you thread in and how you find connection paths and warm paths in. The other great example is I was sitting at tune.com in New York. I was trying to go after Best Buy, and I used the Team Link feature in LinkedIn because I worked for LinkedIn in the Empire State Building eventually. And I found that one of our engineers in the Seattle office had been at Best Buy on the mobile team. He just went into Facebook, messaged her, and invited her to lunch that day. So within 20 minutes, had a meeting with the VP of mobile for Best Buy using this technique. So I have so many of these stories, but I don't really know how I uncover it. It's just if I want to get to a target, I'll take almost any angle to get there. I mean, the funniest one is a US cable company out of Atlanta, and this is probably like a $400,000 deal that turned into a 7-figure deal. And it
Wow.
closed because our head of channel played rugby in Cambridge in England with the CMO of this Fortune 500 company. And like they grew up together on the same street, and their parents were like 70 years old and were walking in Cambridge. So, like this massive deal is happening because these people in Cambridge know each other and these kids grew up together. And that was the English connection. But that's the level I try to take it. I mean, when I want to get a deal done, I'll go through every possible research step and leverage all the different pathways in.
What's your process for doing that then? Like, is there a way that you think other people can mimic that creativity or develop their own creativity who might not have the same connections or have the same leverage?
Yeah, I mean, if you see what Dale Dupree is doing or Stu Heineck, that's even farther. Like, I guess this guy, Dan Walshman, sent a sword, like a $1,000 sword with a carved like slogan in it. Like, we're going to win the battle, but it gets hand delivered in like the cedar
That's
box.
crazy.
And this $1,000 sword. I think he said he had a 99% success rate. I don't know, like in this climate, if you can send swords to CEOs, but it's kind of genius because, you know, a lot of people, it gets creative where you send like a cutting board and say, can I carve out time? And then there's like a crumpled letter that Dale does where it's like, oh, this was the letter I was trying to send you, but I threw it out, and you send it. You know, so he does that. He's just like a fully eaten box of donuts. But ones I have done, I sent a drone without the control.
That's cool.
We had a competitor at the time called Apps Flyer. So we said like Apps Fly Higher with Tune and send drones. And then we had a competitor called Cake, and we sent Cake on dry ice, like let them eat cake. And then we took all their best customers and sent them Cake.
Those are awesome.
Those are interesting ones, but the cutting boards work well. And I always give this story on lectures, and somebody will be like, oh, I tried the cutting board, dude, and it worked. So I actually had one client that only sent cutting boards. I call it cutting board caper because he turned the camera. He's drop shipping cutting boards, just licking the stamps. It's his entire thing. It's an enterprise that he just sends cutting boards, carve out time. He's got custom cutting boards, got their name on the cutting boards, got a
Wow.
charcuterie board like for their kid. I was like, okay. It was a tough client. Didn't want to do many DMs, but it does work if you're willing to go for it, if you can do cartoons. But I was really inspired by the book, How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And it's just like, but if you're not a cartoonist, how do you translate that? So in Justin Michael Method 2.0, I get into some of the stunts and techniques that I did. Another great one is I was at a conference in Las Vegas for a company called Coachava, and I just wore like a Adidas tracksuit, and then I had a fishbowl, and I had a drone, like a $900 VR drone. And I'm like, I'm raffling this, and I got 700 business cards. I looked ridiculous, and then I just picked the winning one it's a famous company, but like I just picked the winner. So I don't know if that's a rigged game, but it was a good attention grabber, and 100% of people put their card in.
And after things like the cutting board and doing that, do you think it becomes old after time and you have to reinvent? Because I imagine it would as more people hear about it and start using it. How do you reinvent then?
The truth about those like stunts, I would say, or the hands-on contact marketing, as Stu Heineke called it, is people are too lazy. They won't put in the works. At one company, I got kind of a blank check to send FedEx, and we had this ability to do a social media assessment. So we laminated them, printing them out, made it really nice, and send it via FedEx, which, depending on your region, could be $25 to $35, like just your overnight. But I had this scenario where I was sitting in St. Louis, Missouri, and the FedEx guy would just walk through the front door into the conference room in the middle of the meeting and hand my CEO a FedEx envelope, and she'd like open it in the meeting. And I was like, this is gold. I'm just going to FedEx everyone. I'm just going to call, because it's kind of guaranteed. They feel bad, like guilty, like it's a $40 item. What's in it? This was back in a book by Tony Parinello called Selling DeVito, the very important top officer. I'm kind of an encyclopedia of old books, but the translation of this is write a one-page, get a point of view out of AI, send it in FedEx, get budget to do this, find your best prospects, get the address, and try sending them, because there's a very high conversion rate.
That's really cool. It's a different way of thinking about it than I think most people would. It's not the easiest route, but it probably has the most conversions, I imagine. And you talked a little bit about earlier about working at LinkedIn and the Empire State Building. Did you learn any tricks from there and that you use then to grow your personal brand? Because you live a pretty private life, but you've managed to grow an amazing following despite this.
Yeah, so I was studying the outbound approaches. One, it was really interesting calibration to be able to give an audit or assessment somehow. So I ran into this idea studying massive SDR teams at LinkedIn, Salesforce, and all other places. I found that if you had some kind of conversation starter that was a takeaway, like an audit or an assessment or a way to gauge them and benchmark them toward their peers. But then I found something really simple, whereas if you just ask a brutally honest question that invites people to critique, I call this the opinion heuristic. Like, if you go on Amazon and look at a pair of blue jeans, there's 16,000 reviews. I'm not the kind of person that does that review. But what I'll do is when I'm sending my books, I'll be like, red or blue. Or I'll send a PDF and say, what would you change? I'll send a video, I'll drop a video on LinkedIn and say, how was this video? How would you improve it? And the minute you ask for critique from other human beings, you get like a 90% response. They can't help themselves. They want to coach you. It works on cold calls too. You're bombing a cold call and you're like, hey, I'm bombing this cold call. What would you change? But the realization that came out of the LinkedIn was really saturation points, and that became combo prospecting. I figured out that blended combinations of touches is as effective, if not more effective, than personalization. So you can write the most perfect hyper-personalized emails, but if all I do is call you, leave a voicemail, send an email, connect on LinkedIn, hit you up on Twitter, if I do 4 or 5 different channels together, it will be more effective because it's the nature of a mobile phone, right? I call, leave a voicemail, it rings, screen, visual voicemail, send an email. Oh, there's the Justin Michael again. Add on LinkedIn. Oh, there's the Justin Michael again. Ding, 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 like a swarm of bees. And then they actually look. And the problem is even the most perfect email, especially a long one, they look at it and they star it. They don't have time, right? So yeah, so I saw, I don't know how I picked this up, just different companies, but I saw people like really, I had this GM named Jim in San Francisco, and he would box at lunch. He'd come in for 1 hour and he would sit down at a Polycom in a big room and he'd make a call on the Polycom, like a big speakerphone. He'd leave a message and he'd always say, I'll follow up with a note. And he would send the note and he'd say, per my voicemail. And I'd come back the next day and he'd send 10 of these and he'd be like, oh, and he had 10 responses and he worked 1 hour. And I'm like, what the hell are you saying? But what it was is he didn't ask for the callback and he indicated that he was going to send the note. And then in the note, he said, per my voicemail, and then he sent it out of Salesforce. He was getting wild response rates. And it was because as you're looking through your email, you're seeing all the automation and all the chat GP. And you're like, oh, that's an interesting one. That's automated. That's automated. Then you just tune it out. And then suddenly you get an email that says, per my voicemail. And you go, whoa, a human tried to call me. Then you check your voicemail like, hey, did this Jim guy call? And so you actually feel a kind of guilt or a kind of admiration for the person because they put in a level of effort. So I've actually tested a lot of weird stuff. One thing I tested is you call the wrong number. So I have the wrong number and Zoom Info goes do, and I call it. And then I send an email and say, I tried your line. They're like, no, you didn't. But they still respond because they're getting all the automations.
Because they want to correct you.
They either want to correct you or see if you actually did. It's totally subconscious. It's these laws come out of Cialdini in the book Science of Influence. And there's really this concept of reciprocity, which was the Hare Krishnas, they bump you in the airport, give you a flower. Well, they started making millions of dollars using this technique. They were banned from the airports. But I used that. I used these subtle little gives, and even listening to someone, asking someone for a true opinion or critique. People love that because it's a form of listening. So it is a give, giving them a chance to like be blunt with you. So anyway, lots of books, lots we could talk about on this subject for sure.
When you're doing that omni-channel approach and just doing as many different channels as you can, how are you differentiating the messages? Are they all the same? Like, you don't want to repeat yourself too much, or do you?
This is the crazy thing. I have been at this long enough to test everything. So when Jeb Blunt said he contacted someone for, I don't know, 200 times, I don't know what it was. I think I probably beat his record. I contacted this guy, Brian Wool, at New Star, 75 times in a row, same message every single day. And I ran into him at an event in San Francisco later. He laughed, shook my hand. We were cool. I never got negative. I never guilted him. Every day, same exact message, good tonality, kind of like Dory the fish, like, hey, like I have no memory, total amnesia. The thing is, and I've talked to lots of CEOs and VPs and C-levels about this, they're not looking. They're ignoring, and then they look. And that's why I have holograms and fractals all over my stuff, because get this, message 17 can't be, hey, did you see my PDF? What? Who are you? You have to assume that everyone is ignoring you the entire time until they react and look. So that's why I use these clusters, and I always have a sense of anywhere you are in a massive sequence that's omni-channel for me, I'm going to keep reminding you the central theme of the plot. It's like if you watch one of these serialized shows by Taylor Sheridan, you can kind of pick it up anywhere. I mean, you can kind of figure out the plot. It's not hard to do. So you have to think about that. People get really obsessed with perfection, right? And they're not even being seen. The thing I do, though, is I do personalization to create curiosity and also for my brand so that if they do look in, the message is quality. Also, I do personalization. So if I'm sitting there monotonously doing this work, it keeps me interested, almost like collecting baseball cards or reading books.
Do you think that can ever damage relationships, is sending too many messages, is following up on the same thing, is annoying them? Or no, you keep doing it until you get the results?
Well, I've had a lot of people block me. I've had a lot of haters, and then they kind of probe into it, and, I'll get shredded on Reddit, and it's like, well, why don't you like Justin Michael? And they're like, he sends me his book links. He sends these links. And then I look at Hermosi and this $100 million launch, and it's like, he's sitting there doing hundreds of YouTube videos for a book. So I guess if you make enough money or you're famous enough, you get to promote your book. But what it really is that sometimes on LinkedIn, I've sent somebody, 20 messages, even 60 messages over a period of years. They're going to the other tab, and then they finally look, and it's like, whoa, an avalanche of messaging has come in, and I've been willing to damage my brand like that. And the reason is because of Guy Kawasaki, who said two things I love. One, don't worry, be crappy. The other thing he said is when he was at the height of building his Twitter, he would do 10 tweets a day. And Gary Vee did this too. And for every 10 he would do, he'd lose one person and gain like 100. So it didn't matter because like the majority of humans, like only 1 in 1,000 is really a troll. Even 1 in 5,000. Yeah, most are just like, hey, thanks for sending the book, right? And if they really complain, I'm like, hey, I'll just buy you the book. If you don't like it, it's $3 on Kindle. Like I spent, 100 hours writing it. So is that spammy? I mean, if someone literally asked me, take me off the list, do not contact me, I 100% comply with that. But if I'm never getting feedback, I call it dialing into the abyss. I just keep going. And that's really what separates me from the majority of reps. One, I'm laser focused on relevance, not necessarily personalization, like work relevance and making sure it really hits a demand type, make money, save money, reduce risk. And then I really just follow up way more than anyone I've ever seen, because with the 80-20 rule, 80% of it's follow up. So like that's how I solve most teams and clients is they usually have 2 voicemails. I'm always like 5, 6, 8 voicemails. And at that point, prospects have perfect systems. 1, buyers are liars. We don't want to be sold to. And 2, we have a perfect system, which is if we never respond to a vendor, they go away. I don't go away. The minute they realize I don't go away. So it doesn't take 40 calls, around 5, 6, 7 calls. Like never had a restraining order or anything, but around 7 calls, they're like, okay, no thanks, or talk to Jane. Craig Kleeman calls this the must-react system, and it does work. It's like a spider in a drain.
That's a very psychological approach to sales, and you talk about that a lot in all of your books. Is there any other psychological insights that you have or heuristics that you've studied that have really shaped the way you sell?
Well, I mean, the big one that just becomes the overarching element is neediness or non-hunger or the principle of disinterest, which translates to maybe like a DMV approach or the airline pilot approach. So people like Jordan Belfort, Grant Cardone have a lot of interesting tonality, intense tonality, enthusiastic. It's just like really hyped up. Thing is, when you show interest, you repel. And it's like, well, how am I going to be passionate about my product, empathize and show curiosity, but then don't be salesy and hungry? And so it's like this Zen cone of like sell without selling. So there's a broad spectrum of how to do this. One, matching the speed or the beats per minute, which is an NLP technique. So like matching the speed. Next one is, not getting too excited when things start going well. So someone started to buy from me, I'm closing a coaching deal, they're going to wire me $25,000 and I'm not excited. I'm just like, okay, you wire it here, you go here. It's like they're in the line at the DMV. I don't break, just dead calm. Like you're about to give me your money. Cool. That could be good or bad. Like now that starts for me. Now I have to help you and get you the result. But people don't think about this. Yeah.
When you're saying matching the speed, does that mean like if they're messaging you every other hour, then you're not responding right away? Is that what you mean?
I think in digital communication, you can be async and you do have to be careful. Like if you're having a digital thread in a DM and you're doing more, like I had this client, he'd get a response, huge paragraphs, then a response. It has to be the other way around, because if you're short and you meter your responses, it looks like listening. Async is fine, but when you're on the phone with someone and you're trying to sell to them, if they're in the South and they're moving slow, move slow. If they're in New York, they're talking fast. In England, they're blitzing fast sometimes. I'm just super fast. You just want to match their speed and the pace and the tone. And then you don't want to have a lot of uptones. These are little micro things. And then really, there's a lot of things like you can't just ask people what their pains are or their problems or probe necessarily or do diagnostics like a doctor. You get to pain through pleasure. So you have to ask them, what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And by speaking about the goals, they bring up the challenges, because we're in this painless world now. So a lot of the old techniques, like what's keeping you up at night, running BANT, budget, authority, need, timeline, it doesn't work anymore. So like I just study a lot of neuroscience, game theory, neurolinguistic programming, behavioral psychology, social dynamics, pull elements from every discipline you can imagine. I study a lot of full cycle methods, everything from Challenger to Sandler to Miller-Hyman. I mean, I've looked at everything you can imagine. And I think the three archetypes that really actually work in modern sales, no matter what you sell, whether it's products or services, are really the doctor, the detective, or the therapist, right? A doctor diagnoses, the detective confirms information they already know, and the therapist has empathy and rolls back in time. I've often do all three of those together, and it's interesting. So I have a lot of formulas and frameworks and models now I've built in my books that are not based on that, but I would say it's like deconstruction in Elon Musk way. Like I took everything, looked at it, tested the heck out of it, boiled it all down, and then I just sort of free-formed it. I got on hundreds and thousands of Zooms, and then models started to appear to me. So I have this like fourth frame chat flow framework, which is in Sales Superpowers around page 176. I have this 7-step close process that I now use in DM, sort of an overlap with the fourth frame and 7 steps. So I have a lot of models and frameworks, because if you've ever seen Bob Ross and Happy Little Trees, I give people really easy frameworks that they can follow because the stuff works out of the box. I could keep going.
And among those frameworks, you talk a lot often about self-identity and changing like who you are from the subconscious and the inner, and that reflects your success. How do you do that? And how do you know when you have a problem with your self-identity or your subconscious?
Yeah, great question. So a lot of people are looking outwardly for the tactics and techniques. Then you start to talk to how they feel. They're pessimistic and they don't think they can do it. They think, I can't call CEOs. I'm bad at cold calling. They have negative self-talk and perception. You go even deeper. You're like, hey, can you earn $500,000 a year, $1 million a year? And they don't believe in their heart of hearts. Like you go run and jump off a balcony. That gravity is pretty compelling. I believe that on a very deep level, but people believe at that level, the level of gravity, limitations about themselves, which impacts them at an identity level, and then a thinking level, and then a doing level. And most training is like, well, here are the mechanics and techniques and tactics, and now here's the Tony Robbins raw mindset, but you never change who you are. And the problem with constantly doing affirmations is you're saying, hey, I don't believe I'm this new identity. I'm a person that has to say this mantra all the time. So I work with people on things that come from like Maxwell Maltz, psychocybernetics, Sid Banks, 3 Principles, Byron Katie and the work, Eckhart Tolle, on a deep spiritual level to shift their identity, their perception of themselves. And in Atomic Habits, talks about the chain smoker, right? Like if someone believes they're a 100K earner, they're a chain smoker, we're going to be like, okay, we're going to not smoke for a few months. On a polygraph, there's still a chain smoker identity testing out non-smoking. It's
Right.
really important to just actually close the door and become the new person and make a decision deep down about your identity, which will then influence the way you think and what you do. People get really caught up in trying to turn off the negative thoughts. That never goes away. Michael Jordan has 70,000 a day, 80% negative. So does Bill Gates. So does Jeff Bezos. Like everyone does. But when you get a sense of who you are at a very deep identity level, that's what really influences manifestation. So I wrote a whole third book about that called Attraction Selling. If people are interested in that, and I'm always working on new stuff really around that concept because I've felt that that's the most powerful thing to impact the rest of what to do.
And how do you know when you're crafting that new self-identity? How do you know that that's the right self-identity for you and that there's not a problem with that one like there was with the past one?
Yeah, so the truth is that the way to win in life, it's an inner game. And the more you can be at peace with yourself and love yourself, and the way you treat yourself internally becomes what you manifest outwardly in this life. So to me, I came up in the music business, I came up in sports, and I had sort of a David Goggins inner voice, which was sort of like the Da Vinci Code, just self-flagellating to the blood, just you're awful, you suck. I had horrible self-talk, and I pushed myself hard, and I got to a very high level, VP of sales, earning decent income doing that. But eventually you have to turn outwardly away from yourself towards service of other people. So I was reading this consulting book. It was like 400 pages, stuck at some office traveling somewhere. And I was like, okay, half of this 400-page book is just other orientation. And then I was listening to this interview with Jay Abraham. He was somewhere in, the Middle East or Asia or something, some random hotel bar, and he sat down with somebody and just really listened and was curious. And the guy goes, "You're the most interesting person I've ever met." And so he said, okay, the axiom is to be the most interesting person, you have to be the most interested. And that goes right to Dale Carnegie, the interview. So in the classic How to Win Friends and Influence People, there's an interview. And in the interview, all I did was listen really well to the executive. And he goes, "You're the best conversationalist I've ever had here," right? So curiosity is the most powerful thing that you can do. The assumption of a new identity is a choice and it's a decision. And at a certain point, you have to bank on yourself, invest in yourself, and love yourself. And you're going to keep, it's like trying to learn how to surf a tube, like at Zuma in the Pacific. Like you're going to keep getting rolled into the barrel of that wave and pummeled until you learn to be still when the wave hits you and to just go with the flow of it. And then you can, like, it releases you. If you fight in that wave, you get pulled in the undertow, you get pulled under. So like these surfers of big waves, they can like get hit by these insane waves because they just go limp in the water and just flow with it and then pop out on the surface. So people they have to be taught the hard way over and over and over. And that's why 80% of lottery winners go bankrupt. Really weird. Could even be more.
That's interesting.
They're not ready from an identity level to handle the wealth and the money. Currency is current. So you have sort of what am I looking for? It's a filter.
Like a cycle.
Yeah, I mean, what is the opposite of currency flowing? Something static, something preventing you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're wrapped in plastic or a cage and you have to peel it away so the energy current can flow again.
And do you think that's why people often get stuck at income level, like glass ceilings as well, like breaking from 6 to 7 figures, that type of thing?
It's a really important concept that eluded me for a very long time. I think one, if you're selfish in your life, it's very hard to produce wealth because ultimately my whole business now is helping hundreds, if not thousands of people through my writing and my work create wealth for their families. So like when someone hires me at a high level, they're going to go and double their income, 5x their income. They're going to go then run teams, help those teams. There's a huge ripple effect. I'm creating so much wealth for what I take in, being returned 10, 100x fold. And that's what the Go-Giver really talks about. So a shift off of self orientation to other orientation, a shift from serving oneself to service of other people. And if you really wind down economics, it's always an equation for value for money. Like even an iPhone, you pay $1,000 for that thing, but you communicate with all your friends. You're able to see all this media standard. It provides so much more value than the cost you do, especially if you have it for a couple of years. Everything's like that. And then you go to a human being who's stuck at making 100 grand or 200 grand, and you see self-orientation, lack of service, sort of in a silo. They haven't figured out a model where they're outflowing more than they're inflowing. And that's what really allowed my coaching business to take off. And Earl Nightingale in the 50s said, look at an industry and look at what everyone's doing and do the opposite. It's like Hormozy, he's great. He's the pinnacle of like what everyone's doing. It's like click funnels and landing pages and offers and offer stacks. And it just looks like, must-see TV. It looks like an infomercial, personal power from the 90s. You got the booklets and the stacks and the, $5,000, but today 99, I went in the industry and I study a lot of 7-figure coaches and I study what they do, and it's radically different. Like the prosperous coach, like Steve Chandler, Richard Litvin, Steve Hardison. I'm a snail. My goal is like the garden snail. But then that reflects the Navy SEALs too, right? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I slow down and have a profound conversation. It could be life-changing with one person. And then they go, wow, how do I pay for more of that? And then they go find the money and create the money or send referrals. And I'm doing that.
Quality.
Yeah, hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands. So I call it Chat Grow Rich because I'm just sitting there constantly. And people are like, wow, Justin, you're spending all your life on that phone. And I'll look and I'll be like, guess what? I just made $80,000 just now. So like, do you want to be on your phone? You want a cold call all day? I don't know. I'm on LinkedIn. That is a green light. I'm going to talk to that person and I'll create a client or someone who reads my book or someone references me. There's no loss. There's only like the one troll in 1,000 that's going to turn, but everyone else, I'll provide immediate benefit or they'll benefit me. And that's the other thing is they're commoditizing humans and you're like, oh, those are no good. Those are no good. You need to create something where every human you run into has value to you and you have far more intrinsic value to them.
So I know we have to wrap this up. So the scene is yours. Is there anything that you wanted to share that we didn't get into today?
No, I mean, I think it's been pretty thorough. I think the last distinction I'll make is I had a chance to meet Rhonda Byrne, who wrote The Secret. And I met Jack Canfield, and I studied that stuff since 2006. And that is manufactured manifestation, right? That is, okay, I create a dream board and this is exactly what I want. Exact house, John Asseroff, just attract it. Different level or higher level or the Eastern spiritual level is surrendered manifestation, which is your concept of God or a higher power, or even on a scientific level, the RAS, the reticular activating system. Think, what is the Dharma or where will I go? Because sometimes if you hold a vision and intention, something way better is coming for you. So that's why I believe in pronoia. The universe is plotting to do me good.
I love that term.
Yeah, my life is way different than expected, and it doesn't. So I was talking to someone that is like, oh, I always get my vision, I get my manifestation. I'm like, my life is wildly different than what I ever dreamed, far better and different and weirder. And I really don't know what's coming next, but I know that if I'm grateful, biggest chapter in Wallace Wattles' Science Getting Rich, and I help other people selflessly, and I open source. If a 17-year-old kid from Pakistan reads my book, comes in on a DM and needs help, I help. I don't big time people. I have that humility. Great things will happen. Amazing things will happen. So I just get up every day and just serve the person in front of me.
And how should people reach you? What's the best way to find you online? What's the best book to start with? Because you have a lot of books.
Yeah, I mean, just follow me on LinkedIn and Amazon, 2 best places. My bestseller has really been Tech-Powered Sales, which just predicts the future of sales. Like to say, I predicted ChatGPT. That's obviously not true. That's, saying I predicted the internet, Al Gore, but we did talk about future chatbots. It's a really interesting, almost sci-fi level of technical RevOps. But my bestseller now is Sales Superpowers, has my whole Justin Michael method system. I have Codex files that go with it, 17 of those. And then 7-figure Formula is really launching a side hustle and doing advisory and consulting. About 40% do that. That's a good one. This new one, Cold Call Algo, is outbound right now. Like outbound right now, you need the phone. And then what's the exoskeleton around it? So yeah, those are some of the books, and there's way too many books. Just hit me up on LinkedIn if you have questions, and reviews save lives. That's all I can say.
For anyone who's interested in those, I'll link them in the show notes below, and thank you. That's a wrap.
Thank you so much.